Hi, welcome back to another episode of the South Texas Power Lunch. I'm here with Josh Sanchez from FloatMe, CEO of FloatMe. Thanks so much for being here, Josh.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Excited.
This is going to be a great conversation. I'm glad you joined us. We're going to talk a lot about the culture of FloatMe, the fintech stuff that they're working on there, as well as how this is very relevant given the whole economic situation we have here with regard to resiliency of the workforce with the startups that Josh is working on, as well as what it's doing for us in our economy and helping to really spark this change of how people view traditional financing. So, Josh, thanks so much for being here. We always love to start to hear about how you got into becoming an entrepreneur and what inspired you to start FloatMe. Would you give us that journey?
Sure thing. And again, thank you for having me. So I can kick off on who is Josh, I guess, and kind of the story of FloatMe. So on me, I've always been curious, about things. Growing up, my dad would always call me the destroyer just because I would break apart things and
the destroyer,
try to figure out how to put them back. And, that costs a lot of money once you get really deep into it. So I've always just had a fascination for, trying to uncover how things work, how they're built and everything. And ultimately that led to the, fascination around startups, starting a business from the ground up. I started, fixing, people's iPhones early on. Whenever somebody would break their screen, I was the go-to guy.
Which back then there was a lot of breaking of the iPhones.
Exactly, a lot of breaking. It came out of my own problem, So I kept breaking my phone, and I was like, it's getting pretty expensive. Why don't I look at doing this myself? So started doing that and started understanding, the economics behind things, what it was costing me to get, parts in, the cost I should be charging, a customer to repair their phone. So that really got me some, exposure early on to how businesses work and everything. I realized how much I owed in taxes because I didn't know about sales tax and reporting that back then.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So
sales tax will get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A whole nother conversation. So, I realized that, and, it was just an awesome experience. And fast forward, to college, I actually went to the University Incarnate Word here in San Antonio. And I graduated with my degree in business. So okay. I graduated the degree in business from UIW. And right out of school, I started working for a company called ADP. So, one of the nation's largest payroll providers, and was there for about 6 months. And long story short is I hated it. I hated it simply because, in the sales culture and environment, it's very, you're going to go 100 times at it and you might get one, lead or success from it. And in the organization I was in, it was very cold call driven. And frankly, I felt that there was better ways to generate business. And in a large organization, there's chain of command. You're one of 100,000. It's very hard to institute change. So I went back to my roots and I quit to go work for a startup, which what we did there, Matt, was it was called Digital Creative Institute at the time.
Okay.
I think it's now rebranded to New Apprenticeship. And what we did there was we pioneered the nation's first registered digital marketing apprenticeship program with the U.S. Department of Labor. It's a long way to say it, but ultimately what we did is we helped bridge the gap between digital marketing talent when they're coming out of school. So oftentimes you see, digital marketing or any grad in general complain about how they can't get a job, because employers are looking for all these skill sets and everything, but schools aren't teaching, undergrads anything about that. So what we did was we bridged that gap with employers that were looking for talent and connected the employees or students to those employers, but did so in a way where they were enrolled in a 12-month apprenticeship program.
Okay.
So they would learn things about digital marketing, on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the evenings, and then go apply that in the workplace. The people that they were learning from were practitioners of the craft. So think VPs of marketing, CMOs, directors of marketing, et cetera, anything, within the realm of marketing, to come teach them these evenings. And then for the employers, well, they were getting, a more aligned candidate incentive-wise. And then when the 12-month program completed, the students, they would graduate, or apprentices would graduate with no debt because they would take a reduction in their pay to cover the cost of tuition. What we found was that after the course of 12 months, most of these apprentices were getting promotions thereafter.
Oh, wow.
And, employers, it helped increase the longevity of the employee being there as far as retention. So really awesome experience. Did that for about 2.5 years as their head of partnerships. And one day, I guess getting to the FloatMe story, on my way to work, I was involved in a car accident where I was hit by a San Antonio City bus.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, and, being a good human, I guess, I was insured. Except Geico is going to take forever to pay out a claim because, via self-insured, the bus company. And so I'm in a position where I got to get by to the next paycheck. As do 78% of Americans. 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck every single year.
78%.
78%.
Wow.
So that's quite a lot of people. 3 and 4, basically, of us are living paycheck to paycheck.
And that doesn't mean that these are lower socioeconomic people.
Nope.
There's a very, well-off people doing the exact same thing as far as from a salary standpoint. What we would say, oh, wow, they're paid really, really well.
Agreed. And I can talk into the specifics of our member base here in a bit too, and it might be some eye-opening stats with that. But I'm in that position, it's the same thing like 78% of Americans, where I'm trying to figure out how to get by to the next paycheck, and I had to dish out the cash, that I had in my savings to repair my vehicle. At the time too, I didn't have, a credit card or anything, and credit is a whole catch-22. Right. So you need credit to build credit.
Right.
It's like, how do you solve, for that? So, and I've always been very prideful. So I could have asked my parents for money and I didn't. I want to figure out things on my own, how to go about life. And so I made the mistake of taking out a predatory loan in lieu of, spending my savings to repair my vehicle and how to get by to the next paycheck. And after that experience, Matt, I was, just really infatuated with the thought that there was no better alternative, or I did not know of a better alternative. And, it resulted in a couple of overdraft fees, which, are $35 a piece. And that alone is a, $46 billion industry. And every year,
$46 billion.
just overdraft fees alone. 1 in 3 Americans get hit with at least, one overdraft fee per year. So it's an evident problem that exists.
Sure.
And it kind of sucks, when sometimes it could be a $2, charge of coffee that turned into a $37, charge.
Well, and I would assume many times, maybe this is a wrong assumption, is sometimes it's a timing of cash flows within the banking system itself.
Exactly.
Versus an actual access to cash where the deposit is made, but you lose that access to funds for, sometimes days because of holidays and weekends versus, and then when the orders are processed of when that cash gets in. I mean, It's a crazy game. There are, I think, some aspects of overdraft fees that make some sense, but their actual application of it catches so many people for no reason.
I could not agree more. And I think, in fact, in 2012, some banks might have gotten in trouble for how they were structuring the order flow of
That's right. They were moving their order flow around during that time. I remember that.
So that's, I guess, one kind of fee. The other is insufficient funds fee, the NSFs. Those are actually very interesting too. You could have, let's say, $5 in your account. So you clearly have a positive balance.
Right.
But then let's say Netflix comes in and tries to bill you $9.99, per month for their membership.
Right.
Even though that debit does not succeed, you still get
hit with
NSF.
That's right.
And you were doing the good thing. You had positive balance in your account.
Right.
So it's just really interesting how the way those fees, are really structured to work. So, made that mistake, became infatuated with the thought of a better alternative. And long story short was started to learn about the CFPB. So for the audience, the CFPB is a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're a body that works to regulate how financial services companies should work based on consumer advocacy, even, policy at the federal level. And there came the birth of wage advance programs. So the whole premise behind it is if you've already worked, today's hours, why can't you get paid, today's hours? And the reasoning behind it is, at least in America, so most pay cycles always run a pay period behind.
Right.
The hours you work for today, you're not going to get paid tomorrow, et cetera.
Right.
So the concept of wage advance programs is basically allowing you to draw on hours that you've already earned but haven't been paid yet. Started learning about the whole regulatory framework, and we initially launched FloatMe as an idea to work with employers to offer the benefit of wage advances of up to $200. The reason on the amount was that we saw that was the average, payday loan that was being taken out. And to offer this as an employer-sponsored benefit for employees to increase employee happiness. One of the biggest reasons why they're stressed at work is due to finances.
Sure.
And a stressed employee at the workplace, inhibits their performance, a variety of other things. So did that, and quickly learned two things. Number one, Americans have a huge problem over borrowing. They didn't need, $200.
Right.
In fact, the average transaction that was causing an overdraft or necessitating the need for cash for things like groceries, gas, etc., was only $24.
Wow.
So, that was a big lesson for us in that we were lending people more than what they really needed.
Wow.
Yet no other company had really ever enacted on the problem of let's just get somebody exactly what they need based on the financial information that we know of the customer. So what we did was we reduced the $200 wage advance limit to $50, and that's what we offer today. And I'll talk into detail of what FloatMe really is today. And the second thing was we just started learning that we're much better consumer companies. So we pivoted to be consumer facing, and on the note of the lower advance limit, there's this whole Stanford case study which is around if you give a kid 5 pieces of candy, well, guess what? They're probably going to take all 5 pieces of candy. So we like to think that the same concept applies to money. If we're given $1,000 loan, the ability to get $1,000, or we get a $1,000 credit limit on a credit card, we might draw pretty close to it, right? So that was the other message that we got from that. And fast forward to we pivoted to be a consumer-facing company. We built a wait list of about 70,000 people from January of 2019 to August 2019 in terms of timing. Went through a second beta, started testing and everything, and we went fully live in March of 2020. So
wow.
We all know what happened March of 2020.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things.
It was like, what, March 13th when the hospital shut down?
Yep. Everything shut down. I remember getting on a plane from Chicago back to San Antonio, and I was like, holy crap, like what is going on? And at the same time too, I was really thankful that we had just closed some more money from angels for our pre-seed round then, and I don't know if we'd be around if that hadn't happened. And it's really awesome for us, I guess, talking about culture, doing things that ultimately, like every decision that we make, Matt, has to be aligned with, is this helping our members make a better financial decision in their everyday lives? So that's how we've built the company from the ground up, and that same motive has allowed us to attract really awesome people that are directly aligned with the mission that we have.
Talk about the culture. How did you create a culture at FloatMe, or how do you create that culture for your workforce?
Good question. So how do we create a culture from the get-go and early on? I think the most important thing to highlight, number one, is the culture that you or your co-founders have in the early days. That is a culture that's going to remain throughout the course of the company.
Oh, interesting.
And how that is set up is, the future of the company, really. It's very, very difficult to change culture from how it started to where you want it to go.
I see.
The most important thing that you can do is continue to foster, good in the culture. So that's one thing. It's, how you act or everything in the early days is how it's going to be moving forward. The second thing is really aligning around your vision and your mission. So, it sometimes things change, and you have to adjust for what you truly believe in, everything. But the reason I say that you have to align about that is because you're at the end of the day, you're selling, in the early days as a business owner, as a founder, co-founder, you're selling, whether it's, to prospective customers, companies, businesses, etc. You're selling to employees, so that's becomes part of your pitch, and especially in the early days as a startup. Most of the trade-off is the comp, right? So you're promising some upside on the equity. And that promise has to be aligned with the reality that you're building in the workplace. And you have to set, clear expectations. And ultimately, all these things have to be aligned, again, going back to it, your vision and your mission.
How did you develop the mission and vision for FloatMe? Kind of walk us through that, because you're right, it's the centerpiece of a culture. It's your guiding post that you have to have. How did y'all go about taking this idea and I guess the vision to create your mission?
Yeah, so I guess it actually started out with the problem that we're going after, and the one thing to highlight there is that the problem is never going to change. You know, if you're really truly going after a big problem, that problem is not going to change. Only your solution can. So whatever it is, always remain fixated on the problem, because you can do whatever with the solution as long as it's addressing the problem. So we started with that, and the big problem that we're trying to go after is that oftentimes the customer base that we serve, so they're a millennial employee, you know, they're earning about $45K per year. They are often forgot about, you know, in the financial system. When we think about like the Fidelities of the world, you know, the big you know, financial advising companies, they can offer things that work for you when you have money.
Sure.
That doesn't work when you don't have money.
Right.
Or working to get ends or make ends meet, right? So we felt that they were often, you know, belittled or taken advantage of, and the biggest start was with overdraft fees. As I shared with you, is a $46 billion industry of itself. So we started with that, and then we thought, you know, if we're starting with overdraft fees, what are the other things that we can help them with? And ultimately, Matt, that, you know, transpired to our vision, which is essentially to help make financial prosperity achievable for everyone. And it sounds bold, very audacious, broad, but your vision has to be that.
Sure.
You know, you have to make it as grand as possible. And then we thought, well, what in our mission can help, you know, make this vision a possibility? And everything that we do has to truly be around our mission, and that is to help people make better financial decisions. So that's kind of how we got to the pillars. So we started from the problem, remaining true to it, thinking how can we be more broad? What are the other things, or what are we ultimately trying to help our members accomplish in the future, and then what is a mission that helps us get there?
So your overall mission, though, is decision making. Okay, that's interesting, given the fact that, you know, we were talking about the floats that y'all have. So how does this comprehensively, like, how do you see FloatMe based upon that mission? Like, I know we've talked a lot about the floats, which have made a massive impact, but it sounds like there's much more to this than just the floats.
Yeah, so for the floats, it's really just a solution to solve a pain point, and that's you know, liquidity. You need liquidity to get gas, groceries, and it's really interesting, Matt, when we're chatting with investors, when we tell them, you know, we're offering these wage advances of our floats of $20 to $50, they're like, who the heck, you know, even wants, you know, $20 or $50?
Right.
And the thing is that they don't realize is that for our members, it's the difference of getting gas to go to work, groceries, copay at a doctor's visit, credit card payment for those that do have credit cards.
Do you see financial literacy as one of the underlying problems of this as a root cause for our society? And if so, how are you guys addressing that?
I think that's one of the biggest things, to be honest with you. And I find it really bothersome that you're having, you know, 18-year-olds graduate with no understanding how student loans work, or their biggest financial decisions of their lives, how credit works, interest rates, all that stuff.
Right.
So financial education is truly the root cause, in my perspective, of how we can work to tackle, you know, broader systemic financial issues. In terms of how we're approaching it, Matt, we do some educational resources via our newsletter to our members. We offer the PFM tools to help you have a better understanding of how you're spending your money in the first place. In order to take corrective action, you have to understand what you're doing to begin with. And then, you know, part of the future of FloatMe is having this, you know, personalized guidance.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting that, for example, law school, the traditional paths, law school is actually a great con to some extent, because, and even some business schools are, right? Because in the graduate school sphere, they promote those that have done very, very well to say, look, you know, you come here and, you know, you'll walk away with a $150,000 law job. When the reality is in law school that, you know, at least when I was there, is, you know, there's a hierarchy, it's forced ranking, and the very top make extremely good, you know, wages coming out of law school. But the vast majority of those people can't even pay the law school debt that they got, and they'd have that on top of their undergrad debt. And so there's been a lot within the bar just in itself over years about the right marketing and promotion for the legal profession. Yeah. We do need more lawyers. I hate to say it, we actually do, because society's growing bigger. Things are becoming more complex. We're even more transactional in nature that are happening faster. But the I guess the ruse of come here, become that guy that's driving a Bentley within 10 years is far from the truth of the reality. But so many people fall into it. Oh, I'll just go be a lawyer and make a lot of money, when it's very different when you get in there.
I fully agree, and I think I don't know if you've seen this or not, but there's a whole story behind even in the healthcare professions, the cost of being a doctor. I think the story is called the $500,000 mistake.
Oh yeah, well, and now medical. To get to that piece on a just quick sidetrack, the old, I would say in the 70s, to become a doctor or a lawyer, was the equivalent of making a $500,000, to $1 million, job, especially if you were a specialist as a medical cardiologist, orthopod, even anesthesiologist. But now, because of the size and scale and the need, those price points as far as wages have dramatically plummeted. Dramatically. But yet the cost of education has actually increased. Exactly. And so you're getting into this cross of the next generation, and really, a lot of just people that are informed deciding to not go into those careers because the economics don't support it.
Plus the cost of living.
Correct.
That's
correct.
going up as well. And
so, cardiologists that, were in the 80s making, $3-4 million today make $300,000-$400,000, which are still great wages. But when you look at the cost of living and the cost of education, around $200,000-$400,000, it's a different decision for a lot of people. Still good, great wages, but just a very different dynamic than the whole, go spend 10 years of extra education and you're going to become a multimillionaire.
Exactly.
It's not that kind of thing.
And I don't think things should be being sold that way.
Correct. Correct. Work hard, get paid well. I am 100% for capitalism in every single industry, right? But the ruse of, just take this one step and somebody's going to hand you some instant gratification. I think a lot of people should have learned that or are learning it, but they all haven't. So
I agree. What was interesting, not to get sidetracked either, was uncovering some of the success of the online colleges that exist, like Arizona's. I can't remember the name of the college, but just because the margins are much different, right? When you're an online. College campus, and I think this was when Facebook, was originally an idea. They started having their lead generation service. The cost to acquire leads, on Facebook for education was incredibly cheap. So those that cracked that nut did really well, and it was interesting learning about that. But yeah, sorry not to get sidetracked.
No. This is exactly why I love having these, because they're conversations, about stuff. Let's shift over to what I'm excited to talk about too is, as we sit here, it's the end of May 2022, just because I hope people will watch this on forever. As you become a billionaire, we'll go back and say, look back in that day. The economics for the globe are dramatically changing, somewhat overnight. Who knows what the stock market's done today? It's 7 weeks in a row downturn, pointing towards a recession. Rates are rising, pointing towards a recession. Talk a little bit about, let's start at the customer level for you. Inflation is, at 8% at least right now. We'll see what it actually ends up being here in the next couple of months for where we sit today. So, gas costs literally $4.39 I saw, at a minimum. My son loves looking at diesel because it's almost at $6. And I'm so glad I don't have a diesel, but I do need a diesel. But I'm glad I don't have one at this moment. Talk to me about your economic, like what you guys are doing, because it's $50, and really what wages and inflation has done to erode on the value of what that $50 paid. How does the economic downturn with inflation impact your business model?
I think it's what everyone is thinking about. So first, when going back to March of 2020, people were asking, well, how do we make our businesses pandemic proof?
Right.
No one really ever thought about that, right?
Yeah.
So you had restaurants shifting to, more of order only.
Right, curbside delivery.
Yeah, being able to order, margaritas through the drive-thru.
That's right. I mean, literally laws were getting changed to
Yep.
give people the access
Yep.
because so much of that money was made off alcohol, right?
Exactly. So they got hit hard, and now that law, I think it was passed to stay in place.
Yes.
In Texas at least. So a lot of interesting things happened, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing was questioning if your business is pandemic proof. Well, fast forward today, it's what are you doing about the recession? Is your business recession proof? And how we think about it, or at least from the consumer perspective, is the cost of things are going up. I know $50 may not sound like much or anything, but it's still, we've seen it become even more of a need. The demand has surged, as a result, and it continues to surge just because the cost of living is going up. So back to another example, I mean, you're having, it's May, right? So a lot of people recently graduated.
Sure.
You're having, for example, law grads, graduate and live in New York. Well, that's going to be pretty expensive, right? Especially when you're making $80, $90, $100,000 a year. It makes it really difficult to get by. And so we've seen the surge actually increase. So the demand for platforms like FloatMe to help offer, better cost-effective and affordable products, for liquidity needs. So in all, we've seen a demand increase. And I think historically, a lot of, consumer lenders have done fairly well on the demand side. Now, the question then becomes, for the business, what are we doing to ensure that we're mitigating for loss rates?
Right. I was going to ask you about default
stuff.
rates and stuff to, if you've seen any of those or what you're doing. And, that $50 mark, is that something that, you guys have looked at? Is that something that you see anything now? Demand's increasing, but is that the right dollar amount? I mean, you said it was $24. So, we haven't seen a doubling of prices. So, surely that doesn't need it. But what do you guys think about your business model?
So the interesting thing is that the amounts have continued to be used for the same things.
Okay.
It's not like our floats to our members are being used for trivial purchases or anything.
Right.
They're still being used for necessities. So it's the gas, groceries, food, bills, etc. So that still exists. In the question of should we think about a larger amount, we have to really, really think about that. And for now, the answer continues to be probably a no.
Okay.
Simply because we don't want to offer more than what we really should, and this is what we are truly good at. Now, what that helps us think about is what are the other products that we can offer to maybe combat, or address, the need for a higher request. And that might ultimately mean a unsecured loan in the future. So that's what it's got us thinking about.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Let me ask you a big question, I think it's helpful. I mean, your generation of entrepreneurs, founders, in your startup phase has been through a pandemic, which we'd never been through. Well, we hadn't been through one in quite a long time. And now we're going through, severe economic, I would say turmoil. Who knows what it is? Just
who knows if it's
the variability of things it's pretty extreme. How does a founder look at this, and what should they be concerned about to build resiliency in their business?
Really, really, really good question. I think you're having founders be very, very confused. The reason for that is because prior to the events that are going on today, the markets were rich with cash, especially from the funding side. And I mean, it still is today. So in the prior state, I mean, you had the richness of capital. The number one goal becomes growth.
Right.
How can we scale this one metric that defines growth for the business? And let's pump dollars at it. You saw companies raise at obscene valuations.
Yeah.
People want to make a variety of bets, and it was a capital-rich environment. Fast forward to today, so you're having the markets are still rich with capital. However, the focus has become different for funders. Now it's about, let's focus on the best companies, let's double down, and in the future, only the best companies are going to get funded. So from a founder perspective, you're coming away from a climate which was let's burn cash, let's fuel growth, et cetera, to now having to think about, okay, how the heck do I push in the right direction? Sadly enough, you're having some people question, like, well, what is EBITDA?
Right.
I mean, you should probably know that before then.
I just thought it was cash in. What do I need to worry about the bottom of that piece of paper they sometimes look at?
Exactly.
Just looking at revenue.
Yeah, so now you're having people question that.
Yeah.
You're having to think about what can I do to reduce burn? What are the drivers I should really be focusing on for the business? And ultimately, that one of those big things is revenue, right? So
Sure.
how can we optimize around revenue? So I think for founders, I bet a lot are feeling confused now with two different sides. One of which existed prior to the climate today, and one you should be thinking about, moving forward.
So, it's interesting because, here in my practice, I deal a lot with, what I would say, mild growth. Mm-hmm. So a little bit more sustainable as far as, cash flow positive versus, some of the work I do with startups. Mm-hmm. KPIs, it's a universal term. The KPI in the startup world, as you said, is usually your key growth indicators, right? That it's really just a, KGI. Mm-hmm. Whereas in most businesses I deal with, private equity looks a lot at this too, right? They're looking at sustainability KPIs as well as that growth factor that's there. Are you starting to see a lot more conversations around a multitude of KPIs that are more sustainable focused and not just growth focused?
Fully agree. So we're starting to see more of that. And, frankly, for us, I'm glad I understood this early on, but it's, let's build a viable business. Let's
right.
make sure that the business model works from the ground up or from the early stages, and ensure that it drives long-term sustainability for the business. Although you don't have to be profitable early on, think about what that path looks like.
Right.
Focus on net positive gross margins on the business. So we did a lot of that early on, and for us, it's ensuring that we're still heading in the right direction. So on our end, we've seen some of that. I encourage those that have boards to start talking about that more frequently. But we've started to see some change in conversations with that.
So for those that don't understand how to read an income statement and know what EBITDA is, one of the big buckets you've got is your fixed costs, not your variable costs, to do, but you've got your fixed costs. We've got a lot of overhead. Typically in these high growth functions, we'll pour a lot of money into that overhead because it will move that KGI. Whatever that growth metric is. What do you see right now in the tech landscape around what companies are doing around that overhead? Mm-hmm. Do you see people being opportunistic and trying to grow that, or do you see a lot more layoffs that are occurring? We see it at the national headlines, but what are you seeing, from your vantage point in fintech?
So from my vantage point, I can talk about also how we're thinking about it, is we're seeing the latter. So we're seeing, it's in the headlines too, the massive layoffs. I think you're having businesses start to identify how can we become, revenue profitable, if you will. Really start to identify the performance output from their staff, as opposed to the whole, grow at will, hire at will mentality. So we're starting to see a lot of that. I think for companies like us, we're well positioned in that there's a lot of demand for the product, but it also encourages us to think about, can we grow sustainably? There's new rules in place. So, for example, the solution should not be a hire.
Right.
The solution should be, let's figure out how we can solve this with the resources that we have. If that's not met, then let's have a conversation about a hire. So that's like rule number one. But beyond that, it's like, how can we cut costs elsewhere? So not just the overhead. Can we go back? I know you're a law firm, but can we go back to our law firm and negotiate a lower rate? That's what they.
If they're already low because you've come here, the probably answer is no. But some of the high price ones, they probably give you a little bit of discount.
Exactly. So it's thinking about stuff like that, man.
Sure.
Like, what are all the things that we can do to cut costs? Can we go back to the doors of all of our vendors? Let's go knock on every single one of their doors.
Yeah.
And push for a renegotiation in terms of the contract.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, they also, have a fiduciary responsibility to their boards to continue to sustain revenue and everything. And I'm willing to bet most businesses are going to do what it takes to keep the relationship, but
Right.
even if it means, reducing some
Sure.
of the costs. So we've been doing things like that.
Okay. Well, let me ask this from a labor standpoint, because, it's 3% right now as far as the unemployment rate. What do you see as your ways? I mean, are you worried about attracting talent or retaining talent? I mean, do you have anything that you're having to do with your existing workforce and as you grow?
I think the attracting talent is going to become a little bit easier,
Okay.
Matt, just because, prior to the existing markets, and this is just my personal belief, I think it was a very employee-driven market.
Right.
You had the whole remote work, culture happening. Companies were having to compete for all these lucrative offers. The employees are getting multiple offers. Whereas now, given the climate, I'm willing to bet that it's going to shift to more of an employer market. So where now people, they're not coming to the table with as many offers. They are coming to the table because they want a job or need a job to cover the cost of inflation, a variety of things. So I think that is shifting. So I think attracting talent is going to be a little bit easier, especially if you have a good company, good mission, working with good people, all
Right.
that. And not to say that we want to get away from the remote culture. We love, that culture. But the other thing is encouraging our people team to think about, how can we start playing defense? And what I mean by that is retaining employees.
Right.
Sometimes it's cheaper to do what it takes to keep, people happy. And I would rather take that bet any day. I'm willing to do what it takes to make people happy because, people being happy ultimately trickles down.
Increases productivity and
Right.
increases customer satisfaction. That's absolutely right. Well, let me ask you this last final question. What's the future for FloatMe? If we're looking out, let's say 3 years from now, how do we see FloatMe? Tell us a little bit about some of the exciting stuff you've got coming up.
We might be a bank. Who knows?
Wow.
That could be one thing, right? But ultimately, I think we want to be one of the largest, consumer financial companies that exists here in the U.S. And it starts by continuing to do what we're doing, listening to our customers and understanding what are the other financial pain points and prioritizing that, from a product roadmap strategy. How can we continue to execute, drive more value, for our members, but from our members as a business? We need to make revenue as a business to sustain, but it could be that. It could be a broader, will most likely be a broader, set of financial products. And hopefully we're at the 5 million, member base or 10 million, but that's where I see FloatMe in about 3 years.
Wow. So there we go. We got this into the archives.
Yeah,
so that way when you're a
exists
bank,
out there
we'll
in the
say, look,
universe.
it's out there. You have manifest. You're going to manifest it now. That'll be a bank. Well, Josh, thanks so much for coming here and talking with us. It's been fascinating. We wish you all the best. And again, I know you're very busy too. So thank you for your time. For those of you that are watching us online, please leave us a comment. We'll leave the description. We'll have, so that way you can get a hold of FloatMe if you have any sort of needs and look at their membership. If you're listening to us online for Spotify or Apple Podcasts, same thing. Look at the description there. That should be there if you want to get a hold of them as well. No matter what, leave us some comments, subscribe to us, let us know that we're adding value. Till next time, we'll see you then. Thanks so much.